What's up everybody, today we are talking about a Diablo 4 Meteor Sorcerer build, where you jump in, you wrap all the enemies up in a giant fiery snake, and you bring down giant meteors and hundreds of little meteorites along with it. I've spent most of my time playing Sorcerer on either lightning or frost, and I never got a good feeling for fire, but this build, it really hits the spot. It's so much fun. The playstyle is bigger is better. You're bringing down tons of meteors in a small area, so you want to pack as many enemies under those meteors as possible. You pop a fire shield, you teleport into a huge pack of elites, you suck them all in with the snake, and while that's active, you cast Meteor with no mana cost. You bring down meteor after meteor, and certain aspects and procs and things in the Paragon Board will bring down meteorites along with it. So the whole screen is just raining fire for the whole duration of the fire snake. When it runs out, you burn through the rest of your mana and just destroy everything else on screen. What's left will go down with fire damage anyway. So yeah, I really hope you like this Meteor Sorcerer build. I've been going over it, changing a few things for the last few days, and I think I've finally got it in a place where it's really fun. I've also been streaming that process here on this channel, going over, you know, the Paragon points, the skills, different aspects, and gearing up and looking for them. So yeah, if you want to join and get involved with that and just chat about, you know, builds, Diablo, subscribe to the channel and get notified next time we do one of those lives. Got and some interesting builds coming up. So yeah, other than that, let's get straight into this one. Talking about first the gear stats, the best stats to make this work. The ones you're going to be looking for are things that improve your damage. You want to get as much damage into your burst window. Think of the fire snake as like a burst window. You want to be doing as much AoE damage as possible. So for that, I'd go for a lot of damaging stats. I'd start with the damage stats. So damage to vulnerable enemies because Frost Nova will make them vulnerable. Damage to close enemies because we'll be teleporting into the middle of huge packs. Damage to crowd control enemies because stuff will be frozen and immobilized most of the time. Crit damage and crit strike because that scales very well with some of our talents and Paragon choices later on. Anything else damage you can think of, burning enemies, things like that. Then I'd go for ranks. Ranks in Meteor. Meteor is your damage. All of your damage, most of your damage comes from Meteor. So I would look to rank that as high as possible. I think right now I've got mine over 10. I've got it like rank 11 maybe, and the damage is crazy. So I try and get as many ranks in Meteor as you can. And then Lucky Hit. Our enchantment gives us a 10% chance for a meteor to fall on Lucky Hit. So anything that gives Lucky Hit bonus, I'd go for that. And then cooldown reduction. Like I say, when the snake is up, you get instant free mana casting, and you could just bring down hundreds of meteors. So I'd try and get that off cooldown as fast as possible. It also, bringing your cooldown reduction down will bring your barriers back up. And as when you have a barrier, you're also doing more damage with certain things we take in the aspects. But yeah, they're the big ones. You can also take lots of other stuff in here, you know, intelligence, barrier generation, damage reduction from burning enemies, damage reduction from close. All that stuff is really good, but these are like the priorities I'd be looking for. Okay, onto the uniques. Luckily, you don't need any for this build. Unfortunately, the fire uniques are pretty bad. They're not great. So the only thing I'd recommend is the thing I recommend on pretty much every single sorcerer build, and that's the Raiment of the Infinite if you have it. This chest piece gives your teleport the ability to pull enemies into you, and most sorcerer builds rely on big AoE damage. So I would always pick this. I don't think there's a build I wouldn't put this in. So yeah, I'd go for that if you've got it. If not, again, not a requirement. Okay, and then what aspects should you be looking for on this build? Managing your mana is the key to making this build work. The more mana you've got, the more meteors you get down, and the more damage you do while those meteors are up, the better. So therefore, we want to look for aspects that do two things: destroy everything fast and get as much uptime from our snake and mana as possible. Okay, so the big damage ones I'd go for is Aspect of Armageddon. So that's when you cast Inferno, a bunch of meteorites spawn and rain down on enemies. Huge. Then I'd go for Aspect of the Shattered Stars, which means when you cast Meteor, meteors fall down around it. So kind of once the snake comes out and the meteors start falling, the screen fills with meteors. Then I go for Aspects of the Three Curses, which your meteor deals more crit damage against healthy targets, which is really good. So it's like that first hit is bigger. Then for mana regeneration ones, I'd go for Prodigy's Aspect. This mana restores when you use a cooldown. So if you cast in meteors and you run out of mana, you shield, teleport Frost Nova, and you get mana back. Like it becomes like a positive thing from using these abilities. So you can just keep casting more meteors. Then Incendiary Aspect is really good. That restores mana when targets are burning. There's like a chance to restore on burning damage taken. So that's really helpful. Once you have that, you're in a really sweet spot if you can get all of those. They're like the priority ones, I would say. And then I'd go on the like a barrier play. I'd try and get more barrier stuff. We'll be using, once the build's like at the end, you'll be using 2 barriers on rotation. Fire, ice, like that. If you get Aspect of the Protector, damaging an elite enemy gives you a barrier for 10 seconds. So you kind of juggle in between 3 barriers. You'll always have your health bar protected. Huge. So then you can take Storm Swell's Aspect, deals more damage to vulnerable enemies when you have a barrier. You'll be freezing them a lot, so you'll get that vulnerable damage a lot. Conceited Aspect increases damage when you have a barrier active. Huge. So you kind of see there, we're going to be going, juggling these barriers, and then getting these huge buffs when we have the barriers on, and the barrier should always be on. There's other aspects out there that work, and you don't need all of these, especially if you're building this as you're leveling. But having the top, like the damaging and the mana ones, are going to really help. And then as you get into maybe tier 4, you might want to start picking up the barrier ones as well. Okay, enchantments. Fireball. This means when you kill an enemy, they'll explode, damage everything around them. The beauty of this is we bring in huge packs of enemies together, trash, elites, everything we can find, wrap them all up in a big snake, and AoE them down. The smaller ones will start dying first, they'll explode and take down the others, and they'll chip away the health of the elites. Then for our second, we'll take Meteor. This gives a 10% chance for a Meteor to fall on Lucky Hit. If you hate Lucky Hit, or you want to go down more of a burning route, I'd maybe take Firebolt, because that will give more fire damage, it's much more passive. But yeah, personally, when you've got like Meteorite at rank 11 like I do, one Meteor spawning every now and again is worth a lot more damage than the passive you'd get from Firebolt. Onto the skill tree. Okay. I have lots of gear that gives plus points in the skill tree, but I'll explain what I've got actually spec'd in, like what I've actually spent. So just so there's no confusion. First, we take Firebolt, Enhanced Firebolt, and then if you're struggling with mana while you're leveling, I would grab Flickering Firebolt. This means that when you hit an enemy with Firebolt, you get 2 mana back, I think it is. So yeah, I take that first. And then we go down and you want to take Fireball. I would literally take 1 point in Fireball. And that's so that we can enhance it. As we talked about, we enhance Fireball, but you need 1 point in it to take it. We don't cast this. It won't be on our bar. It's just for the huge enhancement bonus. I threw a few points as well into Devastation for mana, because you run out of mana fast. If you've got the extra points from your Renown, you can chuck a few in there. Okay, on to the defensives. We take a lot of these because they keep us alive. The shields give us actual mana regen in there as well. And the barriers, we do more damage once we have the barrier damage in aspects. So you want to put 1 point in Fire Shield, enhance it, and then you want to go for Mystical, which gives us mana reduction while it's active. This is huge. We then take 1 point in Teleport. It's showing 5 because I have that from gear, but you only need 1 point in here. Then enhance it and take Shimmering, which gives us a damage reduction. We're going to be jumping into huge packs of elites, so we do need that damage reduction. Then I put 1 point in Frost Nova, enhanced, and then Mystical, which makes enemies vulnerable. If you want to go down a more like fire and ice route, like a burning frost sort of route, that kind of thing, you can put more points in Frost Nova, because the more points you have in Frost Nova, the cooldown comes down. But yeah, I personally just have 1. Okay, and then if you're leveling with this build or don't have the mana aspects that I mentioned earlier, I wouldn't take Ice Shield. I would just stick to Firebolt, because you can only use so many abilities. On my left click, I'd have Firebolt, and that is used to regain mana. You run out of meteors, you use Firebolt, and you'll get your mana back. But if you've got those 2 mana aspects, you're not going to have that mana problem. So I'd stop using Firebolt, and I'd take Ice Armor, and I'd put that on your left click, keep it up all the time. You take Enhanced Ice Armor, and then you take Mystical Ice Armor. Once again, this will give us full barrier uptime, and you get mana regen from the talents in Ice Armor. Then both the passives, Glass Cannon, Elemental Attunement on 3 out of 3. On Conjuration, I wouldn't take anything but the passives, 1 in Align the Elements to unlock Mana Shield and Protection, and then 3 out of 3 both of those. Okay, down to Meteor. You want a 5 out of 5 that, no questions asked. I got lucky on gear and managed to get 6 extra points, I think, which is incredible. What you should be looking to do for this to get the most damage is get as many ranks in this as possible. Take Enhanced, which lets Meteor recast if it hits more than 3 enemies, which it will every single time. Then Wizard's Meteor to let it immobilize enemies, which is good because that's counted as like a crowd control, which certain damage scales with crowd control. Okay, onto the passives. I take Inner Flame and Devouring Flame at 3 out of 3 for more crit. I wouldn't bother with Crippling, as our Meteor immobilizes already, so I don't really see a point in that, but you can if you want. Down to the bottom, you want to take Inferno Snake and take that all the way to Prime and Supreme. This lets the snake wrap everything close together, give us 0 mana cost while it's active, so we can like bring down tons of meteors, which is the center of the build. Then onto the fire passives. I 3 out of 3 everything except maybe Soulfire, as once the build is finished, you shouldn't have mana issues. But if you're having them, I'd grab it. As you're leveling, you can put 3 out of 3 points in here, take the Fireball, and then yeah, once you get on top of your mana and you're not running out of mana mid-fight, you can drop them back out again. So that's what I do. For the key passives, if you're following this build completely, I take Essu's Ferocity, as lots of our abilities work around crit and give us a huge boost in damage. But I'd also consider Combustion if you want to go more down the burning route. I've seen some people really like Firewall. Personally, it's not my cup of tea for the playstyle. I don't really like the burning damage playstyle. But if you do and you want to go down a full burning route, then Combustion would probably be better. And if you're going to take other things that boost burning damage, the ground is going to be burning. So yeah, you can go with Combustion here. Again, if you're going to go more of an ice route here and you want to go down Ice Armor more and put more points in Frost Nova, then Shatter works really well. But for me, if you want to follow the build just like this, I'd go with the Essu perk. That's my favorite. Okay, onto the Paragon board. I'll just preface this by saying I'm not yet 100 and I haven't tested everything to 100, so I can't speak for the very end of the board, but I can talk you all the way through the start, where I would be going, and the things I have tested and what does work really well in tier 4 and in harder nightmare dungeons. So you want to start on the basic board, you want to crawl your way up to the middle and take the glyph socket. I personally went for Adept here. This increases the mastery skills damage and increases the area effect size of mastery skills. So your meteor will have a bigger circle. It will come down in a bigger area and hit more mobs, which is really important, and it will do more damage for every intelligence around it. So you want to grab a bunch of intelligence nodes around it to boost that damage and hit the requirement. Then I'd crawl your way up to the top and get the board gate, and then you'll unlock the next board. I went for Searing Heat. I went for Searing Heat. Casting Meteor increases the crit strike chance of further casts of that skill by 5% for 5 seconds up to 15%. So as you're casting Meteor, you'll have 15% increased crit. Huge. Absolutely huge. So I'd go up and get that. Then I'd go down here and get 20% fire damage and fire damage over time. You can grab other fire damage nodes around it if you have the points. And then I'd be going to the left node, the left gate and the top gate. That's what I did. You grab this on the way for more fire damage. You want to go here and grab this glyph. And then I probably put the flame feeder glyph into here. I'm just trying a few things out before I go back in here. But yeah, I'd get flame feeder in here. Okay, and then as we got the left gate, I would put on the burning instinct board, because everything's going to be burning. Even though we're not fully going down a big burning damage route, we're not going like the firewall route, everything's going to be burning. So there's loads of nodes in here that give damage reduction from elites, damage reduction from burning enemies. Then there's like damage to burning enemies and damage to elites. So even though that's not talking about burning damage, it does more damage to burning enemies. So there's also perks all around them for damage to elites, damage to burning enemies. So this board alone is really good. I'd go down here and grab this first, the legendary node, because this will increase burning damage by a rank of your crit strike. Our crit strike is going to be really high anyway. So I'd grab that. And then I'd probably head in a straight line up, grab this one here for damage to enemies. You can pop up here and get these if you're struggling with damage. And then I'd go and get the glyph. In the glyph, I would probably put exploit, which does more damage to vulnerable enemies. That's probably where I'm going to go with this board. It's kind of a lower priority, but it's such a long way. But that's where I'm going with that. And then when you go up from the middle, I would put on the enchantment board, the enchantment master. Your enchantments are 20% stronger. So I'd rotate it this way so that it's on your left, and then just go up and get that. So the way this works is if we take this off, okay, let's look at our enchantments first. So for Meteor, Lucky Hit has a 10% chance to spawn a Meteor. And then for Fireball, when you kill an enemy, they explode and damage for 60% of their damage. If we go in the Paragon board and take this point off, and then go back to the enchantments, you'll see here, it's only 50% of damage, and then the Meteor is only 8% chance. So we get an extra 10% damage here, and we get an extra 2% to spawn a Meteor. So they're huge buffs. It might not sound like big numbers, but they are huge buffs. So that's why I really like the Enchantment Master board. So I'd get that first. Everything else around it is kind of meh. I'm not a huge fan of the Enchantment board in general, but that node alone is definitely worth taking. And then as you've got this node here, this glyph, you can start heading right into the right side. Now we're getting into unfamiliar territory. This is what I've not tested. But yeah, from the glyph, going out onto the right board, I would probably take Frigid Fate. So the actual legendary node itself, dealing cold damage, blah, 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 isn't that important. But what is here is loads of vulnerable damage. So there's a lot of plus 10 vul damage, plus 10 vul damage, damage reduction from vulnerable enemies. Things are going to be vulnerable a lot. I'd probably go into there. This is definitely a lower priority board, I'd say. But there's so much on these boards that you can start taking that I would probably stick to first. But yeah, that's the thing. A lot of glyphs do work really well with this build, and it's hard to decide what glyphs to use. Adept is probably my #1 priority. Control is good because things are going to be frozen. Flame Feeder is good because it's more damage to burning enemies. Everything should be burning. Exploit is one of the best glyphs in the game, in my opinion, because vulnerable damage scales so well, and we're going to have everything vulnerable from our frost over. There's a lot of really good glyphs. They're probably the top, is that 4? They're probably the top 4, I'd say, for this build. I think that's everything. I think we're done. The only other thing would be the gems in the armor. I'd go for rubies, the red ones. I think they're rubies, because that gives you more life. On the weapons, I'd go for green emeralds, because that gives extra crit strike damage to vulnerable enemies. Again, everything will be vulnerable, and we scale really well on crit, so crit damage helps us a ton. And then I stick skulls in the jewelry for extra armor, which is very helpful because we're going to be very squishy. So yeah, that's the build. That's everything, I think. I hope you like it. This is a very, very, very high damage, bursty build. You can burn whole screens down in seconds. It feels incredible. You can push much higher keys than you can push very high nightmare dungeons above your level and still be fine. It's really fun. I've soloed the Butcher on this build. It's very strong because you have 3 barriers. So yeah, I hope you like it. Let me know in the comments anything you change. I've tested this for a few days. I'm still unsure on certain things that I might tweak, but overall, like, this is there. This is the build in a nutshell. A couple of points might move in the skill tree to make things. You might have a few things that you tweak, but I hope you like it. I hope you like the core of the build. I hope you enjoy playing it. And yeah, let me know what you think down below. Subscribe for more. Going to be doing some streams if you want to see that. But yeah, that's the video. Take care, everybody, and I'll catch you in the next one.